Hello, and welcome to another edition of Face to Face with Doug Schoon. I'm your host, Doug Schoon. Thank you very much for joining me with this week's episode. Now, this week I'm going to be taking questions from the field. In fact, that's what I'm entitling this episode as Questions from the Field. And the reason is because I've been getting a lot of them lately, so I need to get caught up. Now, several people have asked the same question, but in different ways. So, of course, I've blended them into one. Also, some mention brand names, which I don't talk about, so I've changed these to generic names. And some ask 2 or 3 questions in one, which of course I've had to split up. So you may not see your question being answered directly, but watch for the information that you've asked about, and you'll find that this is definitely being addressed. Now, in this episode, I'll take the opportunity to address 6 of your questions, and the first one's coming up in a moment. But first, I want to remind you to send your questions and comments and suggestions to DougSchoonsBrain@gmail.com. I'll put that email address up at the end of the episode so that you'll have that again. But please do submit them, because I much rather talk about your questions and your topics, because this is me talking to you, and that's what will make the whole series much better. So please continue submitting your questions, topics for discussions, myths that you want me to address, etc. Well, the first question is this. Doug, does it make sense to file the natural nail before applying a nail coating that's designed to be removed every 2 weeks? Well, I start off with this great question because overfiling of the nail plate is a significant problem in many salons. Assume for the moment, which is true, that the nail grew at normal rates, and the nail plate, if the nail grew at normal rates, I should say, the nail plate would be filed 8 times while on its journey to the free edge. That's a lot of potential for damage just waiting to happen. So I don't recommend this practice. I can't imagine why anyone would want to do this to their clients' nails. We have to be very careful not to overfile and thin them, because given that additional damage can occur when these types of coatings are later improperly removed, there's a lot of potential for damage that we want to avoid. So I recommend that nail technicians file the surface of the nail plate as little as possible, using only a fine abrasive and avoiding a heavy hand. The greater the downward pressure, the greater the potential for damage. So my advice is that you look for some advanced nail coatings that have been recently developed that require minimal or no filing to achieve necessary levels of adhesion. This is the great thing about technology. These products are always improving, and there are many options you can explore that don't require excessive amount of filing. So that's my advice to you, that find a system that doesn't require that you file excessively. If that's needed to get good adhesion, something's not right. It could be something's not right with the product, or it could be something's not right with your technique. Maybe your technique. So don't just willingly over thin the nail plate. Instead, find a solution that keeps the nail plate healthy. Nail coatings of all types have trouble adhering to thin and overly flexible nail plate. So keep your client's nail plates thicker, and they'll be healthier, and you'll likely get better adhesion. Now, the next question is this. Clients want their feet to be nice and supple for summer. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Does the sun dry out our feet? If not, why do they get so hard on the bottom sole? And what should we suggest to clients when they want their feet to be supple and soft for summer? I've been told rubbing Vaseline and sleeping with socks helps. What are the facts? Well, here they are. The sun does not dry out feet, but it does encourage wearing sandals and going barefoot, which makes us more aware, and concerned about the condition of the feet. Also, barefoot walking increases the thickness of skin on the bottom of the feet. Avoid ill-fitted shoes, and because these also can contribute to hardening of the feet. This hard layer of skin on the bottom of the feet is caused by the friction that's created when the skin rubs against other surfaces. The skin thickens to protect itself from whatever's rubbing against it. If this skin is removed, it will just rebuild this necessary protective layer. And in some cases, the thickness of the layer will increase to increase protection of the foot. So filing off the skin is a bit like a dog chasing its own tail, which is why it's important not to remove this layer of skin. Clients may want smooth, supple feet, but also they don't want sores, blisters, and infections that can result when the hardened layer is removed. In my opinion, it's far better to use a skin softener rather than remove this protection. Now Vaseline, nothing wrong with Vaseline, but it's not a skin softener. Applying Vaseline to the feet seals the skin so that moisture builds up underneath the tissue, which makes the skin feel softer temporarily. The effect wears off once the Vaseline is removed, and the moisture content of the skin returns to normal within a few hours. My recommendation is not to completely remove calluses or over-thin the hardened tissue on the bottom of the feet, since these are protective layers. Smooth with a mild abrasive scrub or a foot file. That's okay, but this layer should not be completely removed. Only smooth to make them a little more cosmetically acceptable. Also, I recommend using a professional product designed specifically for softening feet. These are much more likely to produce a significant and longer lasting effect for conditioning as well as softening. Now, question 3. Does filing the sidewalls of a natural nail really weaken the free edge? I think that's a myth. I've been given this as a reason why square shape is weaker. Well, I agree this is a myth. It doesn't make any sense that filing the sidewalls would weaken the free edge. But I do agree that the square-shaped nail is more likely to break than those that are rounded. Why? Simply because a rounded free edge doesn't have a corner that can break off, and a square nail has 2 of them. Square corners increase the potential that the nail will be snagged on something and break off. Also, an oval shape is inherently more resistant to certain types of breakage, for much the same reason that Romans used arches to support their bridges. Arches, more evenly distribute the weight, as well as other forces of sudden impact. The force of impact would be better distributed by a rounded shape than it would by one that was square. Question 4. The area of my school in which I perform services is not well lit as I need. I want to purchase a table lamp, but I realize that some lamps are LED. Will an LED table lamp affect my LED cure gels? What type of close lighting would you suggest? Well, I agree that you need good lighting, and it sounds like the school should consider making an improvement in their lighting conditions, because poor lighting can be a safety risk. However, I need to explain that LED means light emitting diode, which makes it a type of light bulb, not a type of light. It's a big myth that LED is a type of light coming out of a bulb. It's not. LEDs are just the bulb, and many different colors can be emitted by LEDs. In fact, they can be made to emit every color of the rainbow from red to violet. To clarify, I'm using the word bulb in the everyday sense, meaning something that actually emits light when enough electrical power is supplied, such as an incandescent light bulb. Some refer to these as lamps or globes, but for our purposes, we'll consider all these to be the same thing as a bulb. The mistake comes when some assume that a new kind of light is being emitted, and that light is called LED. And this LED stuff cures UV gels, so you don't need to use UV. Wrong. This is a big mistake that many are making, including some doctors. Here's the facts. The vast majority of LEDs sold couldn't cure a single nail product. It's an oversimplification to assume that all LEDs emit UV. Most do not. Yes, a few types of LEDs, like those used in nail lamps, are specifically designed so they emit UV. But these are unique and special applications within the much wider world of LEDs. Even so, your question's a good one, because many types of light bulbs also emit low levels of UV, so you should be careful about what you use in the salon if you're using UV gels. Otherwise, any type of lamp that you use would likely be fine if you're not using UV gels. For instance, even fluorescent office lights emit low levels of UV, but they won't affect UV gel products. So your question becomes this: is there enough UV coming from a table lamp to affect UV gels and cause them to prematurely begin to cure the product? After all, these table lamps are much closer than overhead lighting. For some style of table lamps, the answer is yes. The most likely culprits are those that are so-called true color or full spectrum bulbs. These bulbs mimic natural sunlight and can be found either as fluorescent or LED style bulbs. These bulbs can emit significant amounts of UV, enough to begin to thicken your UV gel while it sits in the container. Both of these types of light should be avoided as nail lamps and not used as nail lamps in order to prevent this premature curing. Fortunately, it's pretty easy to determine which nail lamps will prematurely cure the UV gels and which ones won't. All you need to do is coat a nail tip with a UV gel that you use in the salon and set it directly underneath your table lamp, about 6 inches or 15 centimeters, directly underneath the lamp for 15 minutes. If the UV gel appears to be unaffected after 15 minutes, the amount of UV coming from the table lamp is too low to cause an issue, and the lamp is probably acceptable. If you repeat the same test with a true color or full spectrum lamp, the UV gel will noticeably harden or completely harden within the same span of time. That's not because it's cured by the lamp. That's because UV gels will harden once they reach the point where they're only 50% cured. But that's okay in this case, since they don't need to be fully cured to indicate a problem with a potential problem with a nail lamp that you're examining. This is probably the best test you can perform to ensure your table lamps are not prematurely curing the product. Also, I'd like to add, be sure to keep your UV gel containers covered when not in use, and definitely keep them away from the front side of your nail lamp where UV exposure can occur. This is a common way that nail professionals prematurely cure their nail products, so beware of this. Premature curing can result in a product that is difficult to apply and may quickly lift or develop other signs of service breakdown, such as discoloration. Keep these products away from sunlit windows to prevent premature curing on the brush as well as in the container. But most of all, remember this. LED doesn't cure UV gels. Only UV cures UV gels, and this includes UV gel manicures. The next question is this. Can you explain a bit more about the nail breathing and the cuticle area breathing? I told the student that the nail doesn't breathe, so you don't need to give your nails a rest from any nail coatings. And she said, but the cuticle breathes. Well, you're partly right. I'm assuming your student doesn't understand what the cuticle is, or they wouldn't have made such an erroneous statement. Cuticle is dead tissue on the nail plate, and it has no need, nor does it even have the capacity to breathe. More likely, the student was actually referring to the living skin at the base of the nail plate, which is properly called the eponychium, not the cuticle. This helps demonstrate why correct terminology is so important and why you as an educator should understand and always insist that the correct terminology is always used. If you understood these terms properly, you could have quickly replied that the cuticle doesn't need to breathe either. It's a thin layer of dead, colorless tissue that serves as a seal between the living skin and the nail plate. It can't breathe and never needs to breathe. The cuticle is removed before any nail coating is applied, and breathing is not an option. Okay, for our final question, I wanted to discuss tools used in a salon. This question says, I bought a tool that allows me to pinch in the sidewalls of an artificial nail before it cures to get a deeper C-curve. Is this okay, or can pinching like this cause problems down the road? This is a common competition technique that some use every day, but I don't recommend that. Here's why. Pinching in the sidewalls before the product cures forces the center of the nail coating to pull the nail plate upward. So when the product cures, this locks the nail plate into this position, creating a constant upward tugging on the nail bed, pulling the nail plate away from the nail bed. This tugging can put excessive tension on the nail bed tissue and result in causing the nail plate to separate from the nail bed tissue. This condition is called onycholysis. If you're using this type of technique and your clients are experiencing nail plate separation from the nail bed, suspect this technique is the cause and discontinue pinching the sidewalls. Or if a client's nail beds become sore or sensitive to touch, suspect that the tugging is the reason. A little pinching is probably okay. But if your client's nail plates develop these types of symptoms, it means you're probably pinching too much. Use caution and protect the nail. That's your job as a nail professional. Well, thank you for watching Face to Face with Doug Schoon. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell your friends to join me, and I hope to see you again next week for another episode. Until then, see you later.